get seated, please? Thank you. Wow. What great classroom control I have. I want to call the November 8th, 2013 State Board of Education meeting to order, and go ahead and do roll call.
Mr. Albert? Mr. Elster? Mr. Freitag?
Freitas.
Present. Mr. Hendry? Here. Ms. Neal? Ms. O'Brien?
Here.
Mr. Oliver? Present. Mr. Walker? Mr. Watts?
Here.
Mr. Wicker?
Mrs. Here.
Ms. Wicker? And Ms. Superintendent?
Present. John, I don't know about you taking over that
I
job.
don't know.
So, if we could all stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, please. I pledge allegiance. I want the board to note that the agenda has been revised, and you should have an updated copy. I'd like to introduce Kirsty Anderson from my legal department at the Department of Education.
Excuse me.
Yes.
May I say something? I just want a point of clarification, just given some of the recent events. The attorney that's sitting by you, we haven't met her, but is who's she representing?
She's here on behalf of the department, just me,
Okay.
just me.
Okay.
Thank you. If it's okay with you, the draft minutes, I had several changes to bring to the minutes, and with Dan's absence due to the death of his father, and I spoke with Claire just a few minutes ago. If it's okay with you, I would like to defer the minutes to be approved at our next meeting. Is there any objection to that? Okay, then we will defer the minutes, approval of the minutes to the next meeting. Next item on the agenda is the statement of the chair. We're meeting today from 10 to 3. I had previous scheduled commitments at the beginning of the day and the end of the day, so I know we're going to all strive together to try to be done by 3. I have a travel commitment in order to get to my evening event. So with that, I would like to introduce Karen K. Leonard. She's sitting way back here. She's going to serve me as the chair to run a more effective meeting. She'll be observing today just to provide me guidance at recess times or perhaps after the meeting. She is not in any way, and I want to clarify, not in any way serving as a parliamentarian. She's just simply observing to give me guidance later on. I want to talk a minute about my trip to China. I told you at the last meeting that I was going. It actually was my 4th visit to China on behalf of MSD Washington Township Schools. I've traveled there 3 times before to set up partnerships in different cities with schools in that district. This time I was able to visit Hangzhou in the Zhejiang province, and I've never been to Hangzhou. And I went with 8 superintendents actually around the state of Indiana. And Hangzhou, if you don't know, is a sister city to Indianapolis. So it was quite a little experience to go halfway around the world and go to Hangzhou Library, which is a brand new library, and see an entire exhibit about Indianapolis. in the Hangzhou Library. So it was cool. I mean, they had the Pacers. I mean, they had a full, blown exhibit, and it was pretty fun. So I went with Global Indiana, and they hosted all of us to go. And the Hangzhou Education Department and our department pledged to one another to continue to grow our partnerships. And one of the highlights of the trip was to visit that public library that I told you about. But we're putting together a video and photo display, so to speak, to kind of highlight and document the trip. So we'll get some things out with that, and I'm sure everybody will be interested to see what's going on. In fact, I think we have actual visitors here on Monday from Hangzhou, and the visitors are visiting each of the 8 school districts that went over, so we already have an exchange starting, so that was pretty exciting. Yesterday was the release of the NAEP scores, and so I'd like to highlight, the department prepared for you, I think they're at your table, make sure that they are, look like this. These were prepared by my department, and so to actually analyze the information and give you more detailed results so that you can clearly see the work of our students. Letting everybody know NAEP is a sampling. It is not the testing of all students in grade 4 or grade 8. It's a sampling of students. But I wanted to highlight just a couple pieces. If you look at the page 4, for mathematics, grade 4, Indiana's score was the 4th highest in the nation in 2013, improving from the 17th position in 2011. And so, and there was a 3% increase in the number of students who scored at or above basic in 2013, 90% actually. So looking at that chart, you can see that we're making very good progress in our mathematics at grade 4. However, on the bottom chart, I'd like to point out some areas where we can use a lot of work, and that is closing the achievement gap, especially with the Black population of students that we have in Indiana. However, the Hispanic group had an 8-point gain, but the achievement gaps still remain. So we want to make sure that we have a strong emphasis on helping all of our children. On the grade 8 mathematics, Indiana's 8th grade average score continued to the state's trend of exceeding the national average, and you can see there on the chart. However, the basic, at or above the basic proficiency is 77%. So clearly there's a difference in proficiency from the 4th grade to the 8th grade. And then again, you can see that we've made some good gains in the Indiana Ethnical Average student scale scores. The Black population of students had a score improvement of 14 points, and the Hispanic had a score improvement of 17 points. I do want to say that this information will help to guide our review of our standards. I believe that it indicates some need to be sure that we have the right standards in place. Currently, teachers are teaching Common Core and Indiana Academic Indicators, and we want to be sure, since we're seeing some really good improvement, and we've been teaching with both sets of standards combined here the last few years, we want to be sure that we're on the right track to making sure our mathematics is going to be, instruction is going to be just what we want. On the reading, grade 4, Indiana's 4th grade average score exceeded the national average by 4 points. I do want to point out that the at or above basic level is 73%. And I know I've talked with the board members before, and when I go out in the community, I always say this, that reading is critical, that we track our reading progress of our students and make sure that we have that data following the child from school to school and school district to school district. I also want to applaud Indiana's educators to having students reading by grade 3. All board members, including myself, know the strong emphasis on making sure kids read by grade 3. So that emphasis definitely has put a upward trend on our reading proficiency on the NAEP score. At grade 8, the Indiana's 8th grade score continued the state's trend of exceeding the national average. Again, we are in the 70s at 77% at or above basic level. So we want to be sure that we're continuing to have a very, very strong emphasis on literacy. Anybody have any initial questions? Because I know you won't be able to review this a little bit later. I want to thank my department because this is this is really nice how they took the information and really analyzed it and disaggregated information.
This is terrific news, and thanks for sharing it. The achievement gap is something we've been looking at, and a few meetings ago, we were looking at the iRead 3 scores. And last year's scores, there was a dramatic gain with African American students and Hispanic students. I believe it was 10 to 15 point increase in 1 year. And so I ask that we continue to keep looking at that achievement gap and pay attention to it. And Superintendent, thanks for bringing that up. The last point I want to make is thank you to my former board members and board members who have continued for the education reforms that they've instituted over the years. And the legislature, Governor Daniels, Governor Pence, we are now seeing the results of educational reform over the past several years. And isn't it wonderful? There are many indicators of success. Graduation rates are going in the right direction. iRead 3 is going in the right direction. A whole number of statistics are moving in the right direction. And as a new board member, I want to be sure to thank my board members who are continuing, the legislature, governor, present superintendent, past superintendents who have really put into place, I think, Indiana being the leading state in the nation that has created positive educational reform. And we have results here to prove that it does work.
I want to conclude my remarks by saying that last week I had the opportunity to, actually it was this week, it's the 4th. Yeah, my time's getting all blurred. I had the opportunity to visit the Joyce Kilmer Academy in IPS to kick off a new literacy partnership with the Indiana National Guard. In our efforts to build a culture of readers in Indiana through our Hoosier Family of Readers initiative, the National Guard joins 263 partners statewide, making reading a priority for our children. The National Guard Lieutenant Colonel Sean Gardner met with me to express the desire of the soldiers to give up their time to work with young students throughout Indiana to help ensure students are reading on grade level by 3rd grade. In fact, I just want to say it was a real surprise when he walked in my office in uniform and said to me, he says, you know, I've got some soldiers working with 3rd graders in Fort Wayne, and he said, I heard about your Hoosier Family of Readers, and we'd like to take that statewide. And I said, well, you have come to the right day, because do I have a meeting for you? Because that evening we were meeting with our literacy committee for the Hoosier Family of Readers. So he showed up, and as a result of that, we're kicking off a program called Books and Boots. And together we've identified 30 schools and 30 after-school opportunities for the soldiers to work with students. So they were there working with students at the Joyce Kilmer Academy when I went, and on Veterans Day, in honor of veterans, the program will officially begin. So we're excited about that, and what a great partnership that's going to be. Board member comments and reports at this time?
Going back to the NAEP scores, is there anything, this is the first time I've really gone through these, that gives like an overall view? I've heard that we rank 2nd overall in growth, or we rank 4th overall in growth. Is there something that says, combining everything together, this is where you were?
Actually, I think that you, well, you may not have, but I'll send you the link to the actual report, and the very first thing that comes up is exactly what you talk about, okay? And it shows that. And you can click on by state, and what my staff did is they went and disaggregated everything from Indiana and put it in this report for you. But yes, that exists, and we'll send that link to you.
And again, and we've all said it, but I think this is a testament, one, to the things that have been put in place, but even more so to the people that are in those classrooms every day, the principals and teachers. I don't think they hear enough that job well done, and this is evidence of a job well done, so they should be very proud.
Oh, yes, Brad?
I just
Oh, sorry.
wanted to say I appreciated Secretary Duncan's comments. I think when he said they knocked it out of the park, they knocked it out of the park. And I know there's going to be debate about what caused it, but I hope they celebrate. I hope our teachers and our students celebrate. They're leading the nation, and they deserve kudos. I did want to comment. I had the opportunity since our last meeting. I wanted to acknowledge the work of the Honeywell Center up in Wabash. I had an opportunity to see a program, an outreach program they're doing, where they're sending Nashville singer-songwriters into schools to try and infuse some arts back into what they're doing. And I had a chance to meet a couple singer-songwriters. Aaron Barker's written a number one hits for George Strait and Gary Chapman, and a guy by the name of Sonny Lemire that was in a band called Exile, some of you will know. They were out in schools, totally working for free, helping kids fall in love again with the arts. And those things can miss us, and I was so glad that Todd Minnick up at Honeywell reached out, and really excited to see that program. They want to see it grow into other school districts, and I wanted to bring it to the attention of the board, and that maybe we can follow that and see as it's going along, if that's something that would be expanded that we need to see.
Sure, and on the other end of that continuum, we've had some video footage that we're putting together to get out to older students with members of a band that are are avid readers, and getting that out to them. So just on the flip side of that too. So yeah, it's cool to put both things together.
Following Dr. Oliver's theme of music, just down the block here at Lucas Oil Stadium on Saturday, there was the Indiana Association of Music marching band competition. And as a former public school marching band director, I take special interest in the state finals. And as you probably know, teachers, students, parents spend endless hours, even over the summer, preparing for this statewide event. And I want to be sure that we recognize the winners from each of the 4 classes. In Class D, it was Forest Park, were the state winners. Class C, Concordia Lutheran. Class B, Greenwood. And Class A, Mrs. O'Brien's very proud of Avon winning Class A. I would hope that and encourage our staff to send a letter on our behalf if there's no objections to each of those school corporations, congratulating them from each of us at the state board.
Any more comments? Yes.
Our last meeting was my first as a board member, and I'd like to let the record reflect that I came back. And I brought a bag of Halloween candy to share, so hope everyone gets to partake. But in all seriousness, I hope this meeting will be a kinder and gentler one. Most of all, I hope that we can keep our focus on why we're here, to make sure that we're setting standards and implementing laws in a way that provides our K-12 students with high-quality academic opportunities so that they can succeed in the real world. Madam Superintendent, I take you at your word that you're ready to work with us to achieve that goal, and I look forward to meeting with you one-on-one once the lawsuit you brought against us has been resolved, and I know that we can find common ground. Since we last met, I announced that I'll be undertaking a statewide listening tour to visit our Indiana schools and meet with each of the board members in their districts. This week, I visited Emma Donnan Middle School in Indianapolis with my fellow board member and was floored by the students and teachers there and their shared commitment to turning the school around. It's that kind of great work that's happening every day across our state. And I think just the National Assessment of Educational Progress results that just were announced reflect that we've made great progress. We've got a lot more work to do, but Indiana is leading the nation, and I think the high praise from the United States Department of Education, Arne Duncan, reflects that, so I'm enormously pleased about that. We've got some tough work on our agenda today, and we'll see each other again next week. I would just want to say one more time what a privilege it is to me to be here and how much I look forward to working with all of you to help our Hoosier kids succeed. Thank you.
All right, seeing no more comments, it is time for general public comment. And due to the essence of time and our very lengthy agenda, we're going to limit the comments to 3 minutes. And I think, John, are you going to kind of keep time? That would be great. We have 8 persons wishing to speak in general comment, and then we have 1 person wishing to speak regarding the bonus points for A to F accountability. So if Kelly Failer, if I pronounce that right, would come to the podium.
I will say I prepared remarks for 5 minutes. And so if I can't speak all 5 minutes, it may not get that. Should I come back another week?
Yeah, what's the pleasure of the board? I mean, I said 3 minutes, and we had a request to limit, because we have so much on our agenda.
I don't
I
think
read on the
we should
internet.
hear- I think we should hear from her, but just do your best to get through it quickly, please.
I'll talk quickly.
Thank you.
It's not as long as that implies. It's one page. Superintendent Ritz, Board of Education members, thank you for allowing me to speak today. My name is Kelly Failer. My comments are a response to the goals of the SBOE Strategic Planning Committee introduced on September 4 and a parent's response to the Common Core state standards in our schools. I do not claim to be an expert, only an observant parent. My comments address the goal of closing the achievement gap, especially the achievement gap for students whose families live in poverty. Students with learning differences that live in poverty define the achievement gap. With this in mind, please allow me to introduce our son, Jack. Jack is an incredible gift for all things mechanical. He is a young inventor and is tenacious in the pursuit of his many projects. Everything you see in these pictures are works of Jack, a socially well-adjusted, normal young man. They come from his imagination, his intellect, and his hands. Jack is also a struggling reader. K-3, he was plagued by an unidentified cause for his dismal performance in reading. After years of resource help and an MSD-WT evaluation, which produced no positive results and no answers, we, his parents, turned outside the school system for help. We paid thousands of dollars for accurate diagnosis and appropriate remediation. Jack's diagnosis was dyslexia. We have all heard of it. It's common. Every parent I know that has a dyslexic child seeks the same remediation. We all pay for Orton Gillingham-based tutoring outside the school system at huge expense. For example, it is common to pay $50 per hour, 2 to 3 hours per week for years at a total annual cost of $5,000 to $7,000. Who pays the cost of this expensive diagnosis and remediation for the 49.1% of our students whose families cannot even afford to pay for school lunch? No one. Our Jack is an honor roll student today. I could not understand how parents of means find the effective solutions for their dyslexic children, yet for some reason, our K-12 schools do not. For answers, I looked at the course requirements and electives for a special education teacher at Ball State, IU, Purdue, and Marian University, and not one class is offered in the Orton Gillingham approach. To the educators of teachers listening today, how can my son's resource teacher teach my dyslexic son how to read if that teacher is not trained in the most effective approach known for remediation of dyslexics, Orton Gillingham? We will not close the achievement gap unless our schools are staffed with teachers armed with knowledge for effective solutions for students with specific learning differences like those of a dyslexic reader. Dyslexia is not the only learning difference, it is one example. To the business leaders on this panel, you need creative minds like Jack's. Students like Jack that live in poverty are lost to our business world. According to the Bureau of Justice, 68% of the men and women who are our state prisoners do not graduate from high school, and 66% of these have been identified as having a specific learning disability. To the taxpayers on this panel, in April, when we pay our taxes, please bear in mind the portion of the taxes that we pay to support this population of failed students while they are in prison, while they are on welfare, and when they cannot pay for their health care. We financially support this population and their offspring the remainder of their lives. Their problem is our problem. To the proponents of the Common Core state standards, Common Core will not solve any problem with regard to the failure in our schools. It simply does not address the problem. Students with specific learning disabilities are an afterthought, a 1.5-page addendum that lists generalities in regard to their education. To all the members on this panel, 5 years down the Common Core road, after Indiana has spent $100 million or more implementing Common Core that addresses only our already successful students, do not be surprised to find yourself seated in another meeting just like this, discussing the same issue of closing the achievement gap. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And thank you for your advocacy for students that have special needs.
Sorry, I didn't mean to walk away.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Jennifer Jensen, MSD Warren Township.
Good morning. My name is Jennifer Jensen, and I've been an Indiana educator for over 15 years. I have taught high school mathematics at all levels and currently work as the department chair at Warren Central High School. I am also working on my PhD in curriculum and instruction, math education, so I feel very qualified to talk about the Common Core standards for mathematics. I was in school when NCTM, the National Council of Teachers of Mathematics, first released their principles and standards documents. So I feel like I've spent my entire professional career navigating different sets of standards. I wanted you to understand my credentials before I started speaking about the standards, and I want you to know that I support the Common Core state standards for mathematics, along with the standards of mathematical practice. First, I wanted to address some of the criticisms that I continuously hear, and there's two main ones that I hear a lot. First, it's that the old Indiana standards for mathematics are more rigorous than the Common Core standards, and I would vehemently disagree with this. If you read the standards from kindergarten through, students are being asked to know, understand, and apply mathematics at a much deeper level. Yes, it is true that fewer standards are listed, in particular at the elementary levels, but this is so students can master the concepts rather than the procedures only. This is what you keep hearing with the inch deep, mile wide standards. That's what the Common Core is trying to avoid. Students need to understand the concepts and what they are doing and why they are doing it. And I could give you some reasons for that. Last year I was teaching a dual credit college class, and I was so excited that I was going to have some of the best students. And I quickly realized they were the best rule followers. They didn't always know the concepts and the connection between them. And we had to go back to that because we taught them how to, when they see this, they can follow this rule. And that's what we want to avoid. That's what the standards of mathematical practice and the Common Core state standards will enable our students to do, make those connections between those concepts. So do the Common Core state standards move the Pythagorean theorem from 7th grade to 8th grade? Yes. Is that a sign of less rigor? I would say definitely not. The Pythagorean theorem will now be introduced after students understand rational and irrational numbers. So they will be able to grasp the concept instead of just being able to plug numbers into a formula to find a missing side that they don't really know what that means. The old Indiana standards are very procedurally oriented, and that's how they're assessed on ISTEP. We need to prepare our students for the way they're going to experience math in the real world, in context, with story problems. They're going to have to see different representations, make reasonable conclusions. That's the way we need to expose kids to math, and that's what the Common Core state standards are asking about. One other thing that I keep hearing, Common Core only goes through Algebra 2. Well, that's sort of true, but that doesn't mean it's limited to Algebra 2. The DOE still has lots of courses that we can offer after Algebra 2. That's what we're requiring our students to graduate from college with the Core 40 diploma, so that's what the Core 40 is asking. But we have lots of options, and we push students to go beyond those courses as well. So I would encourage you to consider all of the facts when you are considering those Common Core state standards, and I really do believe they're what's best for our students in math. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Kathy Fluentes Rohr.
Which one? Okay. Hi, my name is Kathy Fuentes Rohr. As a mother of four, I want to address a theme I keep reading about in the newspaper recently. I've seen many people, some of you even, quoted as saying that we need to keep politics out of education. And I thought, how Orwellian. What could be more political than what is going on in education right now? What could be more political than the state legislature deciding that higher test scores are the goal of education and that the sole measure of success will be the skill of taking that test? As a parent, I want my child to be able to delve deep into all kinds of subjects and find his passions. But when politicians tie test scores into the future of teachers and schools, that is the inevitable focus. I have a third grader this year. What could be more political than the fact that his teacher, the person I entrust his care to every single day, the person who knows best, is unable to determine whether or not he's ready to move on to fourth grade? Instead, politicians have decided that their 40-question test is a more accurate measure of his success, more than the professional opinion of his teacher. Politics is behind this drive for data and the fixation on dots on a graph instead of the human experience of learning and growing. And politics is the reason why I, as a mother, voted for our superintendent. We were hoping for the things that she supported and supports: more teaching, less testing, focus on the whole child, public dollars for public schools. And what could be more political than the fact that our head politician, Governor Pence, created this other department, no offense, and new positions. I want you to know that there are thousands of us who had hoped that Glenda Ritz would be able to lead us away from the fixation on testing and allow our teachers the autonomy to teach. As you make decisions about this new grading system that will exist because politics has so determined that this is what accountability looks like, bear in mind that true accountability would take into context that children don't learn in a vacuum and that they learn on a developmental continuum. True accountability would see that all children have the broad curriculum and the arts. It would take into account how experienced and educated their teachers are, and so on. And true accountability would also hold these politicians responsible for ensuring that funding is in place for lower class sizes, professional development, and the arts. As a mother, I know darn well that politics is everywhere in education. As I try to convey to my littlest boy, who still believes in Santa Claus, that there is more to learning than can be found on a test, I am also buffering him from the fact that Big Brother is watching his test scores, ready to label him as a failure, and his teacher and his school. That is what makes me angry, and that is why I and thousands of other parents support our superintendent's assertion of her authority. And it's because these politics are very personal. And here's, okay, good, I have 1 minute. Then I also wanted to say, the fact that you guys are citing statistical success tells us very little about whether or not these kids have a love of learning or are learning the interpersonal skills to be adult citizens of tomorrow. They filled in correct bubbles, and they didn't necessarily create or think outside of the box. And it maybe shows that teachers, despite dire circumstances and efforts to tie their hands in the classroom, continue to perform miracles every day. Thank you.
Thank you. Russ Phillips?
Good morning, Superintendent Ritz and State Board. I'm Russ Phillips. I live in Fulton County in a rural school district of 759 kids in K through 12, including non-resident students. I'll say more about non-residents in a moment. I've come this morning to give you feedback on two different topics. The first topic is with regards to temporary superintendent license. Of course, about 3 years ago, the state board at that time and Dr. Bennett put into place administrative code, Indiana Administrative Code, that gave more flexibility as to who might be appointed as a school superintendent. And then last spring, the General Assembly put into Indiana Code that flexibility and even expanded upon it. Just earlier this week, our school corporation, our local school board, appointed as interim superintendent our elementary principal, who has been in that position since 1995. She does not have traditional superintendent licensing. Later this year, we'll appoint someone permanently to the position of superintendent, and if she desires, she will be considered for that at that time. Our corporation, and I've lived there since 1978, tends to be a training ground and a stepping stone for superintendents. Obviously, that flies in the face of trying to have continuity in your educational program. Thanks to the state board from several years ago and the General Assembly, you provided us the flexibility to try to address that problem, and we feel that we have. Thank you. The second topic I would like to speak about has to do with the general topic of accountability, with also choice interwoven with that, and then also coming up to the moment, A to F ratings. Of course, going back to 1999, PL 221 was created with regards to accountability, and there's been a number of changes since that time. I'd like to approach this topic from the standpoint of trying to create a paradigm shift with regards to accountability. My bias is that those in closest proximity to the problem are in the best position to address it. If a school or a school district has a problem, the solution is not going to come from Washington, D.C., and with all due respect to you, it's not going to come from Indianapolis. Rather, those that are in the best position to address it are those in the local community. 1 year ago, our elementary school and our junior-senior high school received a rating of D, like in danger. Now, I'd like for you to keep that in mind as I intersperse this now with the concept of choice. 4 years ago, 2009, our school district had 11 students attending who live outside our district. 3 years ago, that number increased to 24 students. 2 years ago, 33 students. 1 year ago, 59 students. And this fall, we have 75 students living outside the district who are attending our schools. Obviously, these families are basing their choice on something other than the school's rating. I would like to suggest that they have considered things not reflected in a letter grade. Furthermore, we do not provide transportation for these 75 students. I would encourage you to remember that each school system has a local school board, and they are in the most advantageous position to provide oversight of their system. Thank you for the opportunity to provide this feedback.
Thank you. Talia Reed?
Hello, thank you for allowing me this opportunity to speak as well. I am a mother of a third grader as well as a teacher, 8th grade at Northwood, and we got 4th place this past weekend with our high school band. I'm here today to tell you about a student of mine named Colin. ISTEP scores were released late this year, and because of that, my school administration was not able to put Colin in remediation. They didn't realize that he was going to need it. And after we got our ISTEP results, we looked at his schedule. We tried to move things around, and his parents were not willing to upset his entire schedule or to pull him out of band. So he's now losing 80 to 120 minutes of extra time doing language arts, reading and writing skills that he could be getting. As a teacher and administrators and even as parents, we like to say that those statistics and those test scores don't mean anything, because we want to have faith that no matter what teacher my kid gets, they're going to be learning, which to some extent is true. But we need that data. We have to have that. I'm shooting in the dark without it. I get 75 to 100 kids every school year. I don't know anything about them but their names and what teachers tell me about them, and I need a starting place. So I worry about Colin. I try to remediate and accommodate and differentiate as much as I can for Colin, but the fact is he's not getting the best he could have received. These tools are law. We should have access to these tools. So I don't understand the time delays. Now we're dealing with an A through F. As my team at school, we work together, we create goals, we're doing our SLOs, and we don't have this information. What was our school last year? How can we move forward without knowing that? The growth model, I absolutely am enthralled by the growth model. When that data came out last year, I spent hours poring over it because it's real, it's truth. You know, say it's not thinking outside the box, but as a teacher and as a parent, I want to see that. I want my daughter to be able to compete. And I want to take a moment just to thank the board for what they've done. And I'm really excited to hear the scores, the test results. It makes me feel good as a teacher. It makes me feel like we are doing something right. And I'll continue as a teacher and as a parent to motivate my students to love learning, even if they have to take an I-STEP test. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Dr. Vic Smith?
Superintendent Ritz, members of the board, I'm Vic Smith, retired educator, and thank you for this opportunity. Last month in the October 2nd State Board meeting, the discussion of the A through F system implemented last October seemed to me to ignore the system's flaws that led the General Assembly to pass HEA 1427, which says, quoting from the law, not later than November 15th, 2013, the State Board shall establish new categories or designations of school performance under the requirements of this chapter to replace the current system. It is truly sad that Indiana schools are soon to be graded using a system that has lost the confidence of both the General Assembly and the general public. The flaws that led the General Assembly to void the system include the following 4 problems. Number 1, the system is based primarily on the percentage passing rather than on improvement, as PL 221 called for. That creates an incentive to give extra attention to students near the pass line, the so-called bubble kids, to try to get them over the pass line in the next test. Flaw number 2, the bonuses for growth are anemic compared to the weight given 2% passing. Flaw number 3, the growth model used for bonus points is based on peer comparison statistics. This leads to amazing and unpredictable results about low growth and high growth students, especially for many highly talented students who consistently scored well, but somehow got pegged as low growth and a detriment to the school. The ultimate example of this concern came when one superintendent and principal documented a student who got perfect scores 2 years in a row, but was marked as low growth by the state metrics. An appeal on this case was rejected. On the back of this handout that I will give you, you will see examples collected by Superintendent Chris Himsel last fall, illustrating the arbitrary and capricious outcomes of this growth model. Flaw number 4, when all was said and done, the current A through F system has been badly miscalibrated. Many good schools have been given low grades. We just heard about one from Russ Phillips. Many good schools have been given good grades, and this damages the economic development efforts of communities all over Indiana as they try to explain to prospective businesses why their strong local schools ended up with a low grade using a flawed grading system. If you don't know the injustices this system has done to MacArthur Elementary in Crown Point, to Liberty Early Elementary in Decatur Township, or to William Bell Elementary in IPS, you should look into those stories. Many communities have a story of injustice under this letter grade system. Overall, 18.6 of Indiana schools received D's or F's. Florida at the comparable time gave only 6% of its schools D's and F's, despite clear national assessment scores showing that Indiana outscores Florida. The bottom line is this current system is not fair to Indiana schools. If, under current law, we must use the current A through F system to issue school letter grades for 12-13, as I think you must do soon, it should be done with a full explanation to the public of the system's shortcomings and the reasons why it will soon be replaced as required by HEA 1427. In line with the recommendation of the Grew-Sheldake report, the current system should not be used to trigger state intervention of any school. Finally, The current system should be voided after this final use, in accord with the letter and the spirit of HEA 1427. And I'd like you to have a copy of my remarks and the handout. Thank you.
May I make a brief comment?
You may.
Thank you. I just wanted to say to Dr. Smith, I appreciate over the years his leadership in terms of the research he's done to show the efficacy of what teachers are doing in the classroom. One of the things I would like to express as a board member is I would like to ask that as this dialogue continues, that we not extrapolate that somehow actions by the board on a system that, frankly, as a new board member we've walked into, that somehow that's an endorsement of that system. There are many of us that want to see the system changed, and our process of getting there might be different, but that doesn't mean we endorse the system. We like the system. I don't know what each board member feels like, but I've been concerned by what I hear from constituents, what I read being published, that somehow there's an extrapolation that somehow the board, by its actions last month, are endorsing 8F. I don't think that's really fair. I don't think it appreciates all the legalities that we weigh when we look at those things. So I just really want to say for the record and for the public, I would ask that we leave an open mind that there are well-intended, dedicated men and women here trying to move us in the right direction, and I've appreciated your research over the years. I just want to make sure that we keep a bias out of there, that somehow there might be a predisposition of the board towards one system or the other. I'm looking forward to the work of the accountability panel, but I wanted to express that to you.
Thank you.
Hey, thank you.
Susanna Diller?
My name is Susanna Dillon. Thank you for listening to what I have to say today. I am president of the Central Time Coalition, representing over 1,000 members scattered throughout Indiana. I recently sent you a copy of the petition for redress of grievances that we filed with the U.S. Department of Transportation. And I said that I would be here today if you had any questions to ask me, so I am here. But one of the things I want to do, what I did not include in the petition I sent you were the lengthy appendices. However, today I brought 2 documents that I would like to share to you because they are data that is from Indiana. One is the resolution that has been signed by 47 school boards in support of returning Indiana to its original Central Time Zone. The other one is the calculations of the amount of hours lost and the money spent due to school delays in Indiana. Last year, 1,127 school delays were called by Indiana Eastern Time schools. And that was based on an estimated average of $7 per student per hour. That cost taxpayers $47,384,995 in the Eastern Time School District. So I would like for you to pass these down. I was going to talk about that, but I'm changing the thrust. I want to share with you an experience that I had last year at the Monumental Marathon. That was the day before we switched back to standard time from daylight saving time. A student from Tech High School signed our petition. He was there to run, and he explained his school schedule. He said that he has to be in his seat at 7:20 in the morning, or he is counted tardy. It means he has to catch his bus at 6:15 in the morning. It means he has to get up out of bed at 5:30. Sunlight that day was 8:20. So by the time he had gotten out of bed and the sun rose, he had been up 2.5 hours, what is it, from 7:30 or 5:30 to almost 8:15, almost 3 hours, and had completed his first class in school. If you think about, so this prompted us to do some research to find out other start time schools for the Marion County 11 school districts. The earliest start time is Franklin Township Middle School, 7:10. Pike High School, 7:15. Washington Township, 7:25. All of Indianapolis says 7:30, but they actually have to be in their seats at 7:20. Imagine if you had a job that required you to get out of bed and be at a bus stop at 6:15 every morning. You'd be looking for a different job. Students don't have that choice. They don't have that choice. The choice they have is to stay in bed, skip school, fall farther behind, and finally drop out. And if they don't have the parental support that forces them out of bed, that's what's going to happen, and it disproportionately affects the inner city low-income students. Think about it. It costs nothing for us to change our clocks to Central Time. It's a matter of changing our clocks. There's no dollar value. Indiana was on Central Daylight Time for 35 years prior to 2005. It was called officially Eastern Standard Time, but we enjoyed that schedule, and it was much more beneficial to scholarship, to students' ability to learn. And I claim that until we correct this time zone situation and get us back to our normal sunlight schedule, Indiana students will never achieve their potential. Thank you very much. Did you have any questions?
I have a quick question.
Yes.
What would you like this board to do? We hear your statement, but
Thank you.
I'm very interested in.
I'm glad you asked that question. For 3 years, we've had resolutions in the legislature, and they've been hearing of them. The issues has been blocked. We want the issues heard. We think the issues deserve to be heard. They're spelled out in the petition. If you've read it, I hope you agree, because a lot of them affect education. So I guess what I'd like for you to do is talk to your legislators, or I would love to have you come out in support of Central Time. But in lieu of that, if you can talk to your legislators, understand the issues. That's what's important, because they are educational issues. Any other questions?
I've been in 30 years, I've been in education for over 30 years. This is the first time I've heard this issue, and it really intrigues me. However, have you talked to your local school board about changing the start time of the particular schools that you're questioning? Because if they were to do that, this issue would not be an issue.
You're right, and that you're correct about that. There are a lot of issues that are a problem. For instance, Pike High School, because of economy, they are running, the schools are running multiple bus routes. Pike starts at 7:15. The third tier in Pike Township starts at 9. So there's a financial, there's a total logistics problem there. Parents want their kids settled before they start. You're right. That would be a Band-Aid solution.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Jenny Stevens?
Hi, my name is Jenny Stevens. I'm from Monroe County. Can you hear me okay? I've been going to school boards locally for about 3 years because I was anticipating running. And I've been intrigued by all the stuff happening up here in Indy and thought it was time to come up and see what was happening and to get to know faces and places. I've got the privilege of serving on a lot of committees with the school system. And so I want to tell you how much the previous speakers, when they've talked, how their thoughtfulness has really I thought, been just so wonderful to listen to. And I hope that you really heard their words, because I think they're very relevant. As somebody who really cares about education, I frequently ask parents about their experience, and I'm a parent of 3. And one of the reasons I ask them is because I have been fortunate to be the parent of a gifted child who went through the school and just sailed right through. And then my next child, 6 years later, was special ed. And he went to school and started after No Child Left Behind went. So all those wonderful, engaging things that I thought were going to happen in kindergarten with him because they happened with my older daughter, did not. He instead was going to be given that privilege of, you got to be ready to read by the end of kindergarten, and he could not. He would be lucky to even know his ABCs, and he came from an environment that had been enriched. So I really want to say that when you guys are looking at this A to F grading, these are real parents who are trying to parent their kids, and it doesn't make sense what you're doing up here. What we want for our children is engagement and encouragement. And when I hear about these positive ed reforms, and it's no disrespect because these reforms that have happened have engaged teachers in a way that maybe they weren't always engaged, and it has made school systems respond to children's needs, and I applaud that. But I have to wonder, what are our long-term goals, and where are we focusing? Because what I really see is us focusing on the testing. And my kids are not motivated by tests, they're not encouraged by tests, and they're not engaged by tests. So my child who started in 1995 and went through the school system, everything I saw her engage in was wonderful. And I kept thinking, oh my gosh, you know, I never had a class like this. I never had the experience like this. We were sitting at desk, now we're rolling on the floor, and we're engaging, and we're singing, and we're dancing. And a lot of these wonderful things are still happening in our schools, but they aren't happening as frequently as they used to. And I'm very concerned about student engagement. My last child is in the 6th grade. She is bored. She knows what the game is. It's about testing. She has to do well. She is not anxious over that. She says, I'm just going to do my personal best. That's a value of her school, and I appreciate that. But I'm very, very concerned about this focus on testing and not this focus on engagement. And I'm very concerned when we're looking at A to F and we're just giving grades to schools. And I don't see us talking about remedies. I don't see us talking about resources. I'm hoping this outreach coordinator idea starts providing that. But I really am hoping that you guys on this board will start really advocating for that to happen at these F and D schools, and the focus not to be so much on this grade, but to be really on the children and their engagement, and on the resources that those communities need for those children to be engaged. And that begins primarily with discussions with parents. And there is no outreach to parents right now. So please, as you can, look at that. I also want to thank the ADF panel because I realize they did a lot of work. Having served on committees with the school corporation, I realize it is not easy what you guys are doing. It is not easy what they do. You're not going to please everybody, but realize there are parents here, and I'm hoping that people will really explain some of the terms because I will go back to my school system. I will go into the schools, and I will translate to parents what you do here. Thank you.
We are moving on in the agenda to the consent agenda. The consent agenda contains the governing body plan changes for Westfield Washington schools, and you received a memo. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed? Motion carries. Hi, Mr. Walker.
Hello.
I didn't see you slip in. We're on to new business.
Madam Superintendent, I don't know they're trying to draw your attention.
Oh, there were? Do we have their forms? Do we have their forms back there? Yeah, I said I had 8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Guess we didn't have some forms brought up. My apologies. Phyllis Bush.
tradition that goes to the Wayback Machine. And when I was there, I started in the mid-'70s, when some of you were still on your big wheels. I was there, and the population was beginning to change. The school rapidly became an inner-city school. However, having said that, I always knew that I taught at the best school in the country. I knew that I was the best teacher in the building, or in the universe for that matter. I knew all of these things, and I knew the kids that I had were the best kids. And then one of the things that happened, and it just came to my mind the other day, because we've had a series of some violence in Fort Wayne recently, where there have been some shootings, and there was a shooting that was near Southside High School, and I saw the Facebook feed come alive because people were, some of my former students were saying, "That's my school, don't say bad," because it wasn't there at Southside, but there was a picture of Southside because it happened in that neighborhood. People were incensed because they did not want their neighborhood school being called out. In the same sense, back when our population began to change in the 70s and 80s, every time something would happen on our side of town, the thing that they would do is there was always a picture of Southside High School, even if it didn't have anything to do with South. And people, the kids, mounted a campaign to stop the labeling of Southside. Okay, the reason I bring that story up is because the A to F grading system, which I know is a done deal for now, because it labels winners and losers, and it labels people, it labels schools, it labels everything under the sun. I think we need to take some time to pause, and even though I applaud the group that has done the revisions of the A to F, I would hope that, especially Dr. Freitas, you remember at the Faith and Politics meeting a couple of weeks ago in Fort Wayne, Senator Cruz said very clearly, who is the head of the Education Department, or Education Committee, he said he doesn't like A to F, he said he doesn't like ISTEP. Okay, well, then why are we doing this? Why can this, what I would ask you as a state board is to ask for a pause, to ask for a slowdown, to ask for the law to be rewritten or something like that, just so it's more reasonable, because what we're doing right now is rewarding demographics. And anyway, having said that, I will just wind it up and say, take the words from one of our favorite philosophers, who said you can put lipstick on a pig, but it's still a pig. Thank you.
Thank you, Phyllis. Donna Roof.
Good morning, Superintendent Ritz, State Board members. I welcome this opportunity to speak to you today on my day off. I apologize for the sound of my voice, but I've had a fantastic filled week of teaching and 2 nights of parent-teacher conferences, so I'm a little hoarse with that. My name is Donna Roof. I'm a public school teacher. I'm also a breast cancer survivor. I dreamed as a little girl of the day I would be a teacher. I never dreamed as a woman that one day I would be a cancer survivor. And so I speak to you today as both. For you see, there are times these days that being an educator is sometimes more challenging, more stressful, more worrisome, and more exhausting than being a cancer patient/survivor. I never ever in my wildest imagination dreamed that I would one day be in a fight for my life. I also never ever dreamed I'd be in the fight of a lifetime to save my students' joy of learning, my public schools, and my profession. I didn't just wake up one day and discovered my lump. It had been there all along, undetected. And the same holds true for what is happening today in education. The reform movement has been there all along, mostly undetected. But now, it has metastasized at an unparalleled speed and is no longer hidden from the public. I have seen how my having cancer affects those around me. I have seen and sadly continue to see how the loss of public funds, the A to F grade scale for schools, and high-stakes testing affect my students, my colleagues, my district, my neighborhood, my community, and my city. But nevertheless, we persevere and we succeed because that's what public schools do. The lessons learned as a cancer patient survivor are plentiful, but perhaps the most important lesson learned is this, that I did not let the cancer define who I am. And in the same manner, I will not allow all that is happening in education define who I am as a teacher, although I know there are those who would like to paint me with their brush of pejoratives. I know what kind of teacher I am, for I hold that belief in my heart. Teaching is much more than my career. It is my passion, and every day when I enter my classroom, I know going in that I am a master teacher, for if I didn't hold true to that claim and that thought, I have no business being in the classroom. And even more importantly, I refuse to let all that is happening in education define my students, my school, my district, my community, my city. My students have so much potential. Their lives are more complicated than I can ever begin to imagine. They overcome seemingly insurmountable obstacles and are successful because they meet those challenges. Oh, if you could see my students, you would know what I mean. They are so much more than data points. They are unique individuals with their own individual dreams. I want them to dare to color outside the lines and not just bubble in a circle. I encourage any of you to come visit my classroom, but more so, come teach in my classroom. My physicians saved my life and helped to bring back the joy of living. I implore you to help save the life of public schools and to bring back the joy of learning. Give all students the same educational opportunities. Our future, our democracy depend on public schools. As Martin Luther King Jr. once stated, injustice anywhere is a threat everywhere. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Donna. Were there any more public comment notices? Thank you. We're on to new business.
Madam Chair, I have a point of order.
Yes.
Point of order concerns the operating procedures that we've used on this board. And back in May, prior to me joining the board, there was a set of operating procedures that were outlined and adopted by the board and agreed to by you, the superintendent. And 10 days prior to this particular meeting, I worked with staff to add an item to the agenda, and that was meeting procedures. And I was surprised at the agenda publication that that particular item under action should have been there, but was not. And you and I talked about it last night, and I feel that we should be following the operating procedures that were passed and adopted. It's the only way that we can operate in a civilized board. And so I'm surprised this morning not to see it there as an action item. If we're not operating under these rules, what rules are we operating under? So in order to move forward in a spirit of collaboration and to honor the panel that is here, that's here to present, I'm willing to move this item to discussion for today rather than an action item, if you will agree to have it as an action item at our next meeting on Wednesday. Are you willing to do that?
It's already listed on the next agenda item under the consent agenda. As
But,
stated
excuse me, but it should not be a consent item. I've asked that it be an action item, and I followed the meeting procedures. Is there a different set of meeting procedures that we have that I should be following?
David, in our conversation and in my comments to the board at the last meeting, the operating procedures were agreed to between the governor's office and the
Correct.
Department of Education's office. As I stated to you last evening, we are exchanging and talking about revisions to that. I have put board meeting procedures on today's agenda so that you can give further input so that we can continue to have dialogue between the two offices. And it was approved by consent between the two offices at the last time, and it will be approved by consent by the two offices this time. And so it is on the consent agenda for action next time. And at this point, that's how I'm viewing it. So I will have further conversation with the governor's office regarding this topic, but we are in dialogue already.
That is not following our procedures. Our procedures say if a board member requests or asks that something be put on the agenda, it is put on the agenda. There's no negotiation with the governor's office. In fact, I'd like to have the governor's representative come up and just clarify this issue about the board meeting procedures.
Excuse me, this is the chair, and I will call people to speak. And I would rather not take the time at this point to talk about where it's actually placed on the agenda. Currently, it's on the agenda for November 13 meeting, and I would like to proceed on with
Point
the
of
new
order,
business of action.
it's not under an action item.
So let's go.
I'd like to hear from my colleagues on this matter, because if we're not following the meeting procedures that were adopted by this board, I don't know how we can operate. I'd like to hear from some of my other board members and not constrain conversation.
We're going to go on with new business on letter A, please. Proposed procedures for releasing grades. So we are headed towards the releasing of grades.
Madam Chair, I would like to respond to what our colleague has said.
Could we have
just
this
briefly.
conversation during discussion during the proper time? of
Well,
the
he's
meeting?
raising it as a point of order, so I believe it is proper now. And I think just for the public that's here, as well as all of us, it's important that we be clear that these are our rules of procedure, not the governor and your rules of procedure. Those rules were adopted by this body as to how we would govern these meetings. And quite frankly, while it's nice that you and the governor's office are negotiating, we have to approve of those as well. We are the actual board members, and we have no other recourse other than those rules that everyone's agreed to. So I just ask you to kindly and respectfully stick to the rules until such time as they are changed. Thank you.
I appreciate your comments. Going on to the,
If I may.
yes,
I would just echo those comments. And, you know, as somebody who's just been on the board for less than 45 days, you know, we do have rules. They've been adopted by the board. And I just feel that an inordinate amount of time has been wasted on this tit for tat, trying to get things on the agenda, you know, debate over, you know, what comes first in the meetings. You know, we really need to get beyond that. And, you know, as board members, there's you know, 11 of us, and, you know, we all have a voice here, and we do have rules. So I would just ask that we respect the rules that govern this body, and they're written down on paper, everyone can read them. And I think what the requests that my fellow board members are making are, you know, in good faith and, you know, respectfully. But we feel that, you know, in order to run these meetings in the most professional way, that the rules should be followed.
and I'll consider your request. Thank you.
I hope so. I hope you consider the request.
At the current time, they're on the consent agenda, and I will consider your request.
But that's not what the meeting procedures say. They don't say that you get to decide what goes on the agenda or what it doesn't. The meeting procedures that you've agreed to in May say if a board member requests an item be on the agenda, it will be on the agenda. It says nothing about the governor or you or anyone else approving it. And again, I'm just asking, if those aren't the rules, please give me a copy of the rules so I can follow them. That's all.
And we'll talk about this item in terms of input into that process for revising those board operating procedures later in the agenda. And I did put it on discussion for today. So onto the agenda. We have the A to F release of grades. I did give you, first of all, I want to make a statement that there has been a lot of misconception that somehow I am delaying the release of A to F grades. That could not be further from the truth. I'm a classroom teacher. I am well aware that teacher pay is tied to the release in part of some of these grades, and that schools are anxiously awaiting to have those grades so that they can continue and on their way to actually getting payment to teachers for their increases. So there isn't anyone more committed to releasing these grades. However, there are procedures that must be followed. And the first procedure that I reiterated at the last meeting was that the department needed to, we had just closed the window, and we needed to have the applied skills rescores. And by the way, those are done by hand. Those are not computer-based assessments. And there were 55,000 of them this year that had to be rescored. I indicated and asked Deb Daly from the department to please give you an indication on when we might be able to release those grades. And she said we would be able to get it done by Thanksgiving. And so with that, we received the scores back from CTV on November 5. And so I have given you an outline of the release of the schedule. And I would like for Kirsty Anderson to talk to you briefly as to why we have proposed this particular schedule. And then we can proceed with how the board might want to proceed with that. So if you could go, Kirsty, and just talk briefly about why it is that the schedule before them is as it is.
Can I ask a quick question?
Yes.
Just a point of clarification. We have that 55,000 ISTEP skills tests need to be rescored. Are we talking about physical tests or items within the test?
No, I'm talking about the physical tests that were requested to be rescored. So we're talking about the writing samples, we're talking about the applied skills piece in which they needed that. These are 55 different applied skills rescore.
So 55,000 individual tests need to be rescored?
Yeah, wait just a second. Michelle Walker, are you in the room? Debbie, do you happen to know the answer to that question?
I don't know the answer to that. I thought it was tests.
Yes, I believe it's tests, the entire. Yes, I do not believe
I would
they're
appreciate
individual
it.
questions.
I'm just curious the
Like
percentage
they asked for a rescore of the writing sample, or there's an ask for a rescore of particular sections.
Right.
In entire sections.
And I'm just trying to better understand, are we talking about individual components within each test, or are we talking about a total of 55,000 tests? Just trying to figure out
Sure.
exactly what population is affected by
Sure.
the rescore.
Sure.
Madam Superintendent?
I will get a clarification for
Thank you.
that. Yes.
Just along those lines, I had the same question, so I appreciate Sarah raising that, because in looking at this, and I'm anxious to get clarification as well, because 55,000 test items, if it's test questions, represents only like 1/10 of 1% of all the tests. So there has been a lot of confusion. There are people out there that literally think there are 55,000 tests, and if there's 55,000 tests, then I have more questions because we only invalidated 1,300 test scores.
These are the applied skills
I understand
that
that.
parents always have the right to appeal. And so I just know that there were 55,000 that had to be hand scored and rescored.
Will it be possible for somebody from the department, while we're here today in the meeting, to get us clarification
Most
on that?
definitely. I
Because
think
that is a
somebody
critical
texted
point.
somebody right now.
And if possible, along with that, how that number compares to previous years. In other words,
Yes.
how much variance is
I did
that?
ask for an approximate of the number before, and it was like 40,000.
Okay.
Kirsty?
Good morning. You may have seen the proposed school grade schedule from the Department of Education. And essentially, we are proposing a revision of the way scores have been going forward to the board. What the department proposes, and this is based on statutory law, is that the department will, upon getting the data, will make its findings and assessments as it is required to do by the statute. And once it has made those findings and assessments, these will then be submitted to the board, and you have a timeline, the dates by which this should be done. And at that point, the board will place the schools into their categories or designations, meaning give the schools their grades. And those will be the school's final grades. And then the department is then proposing that once the board has given the schools their grades, the schools may then submit their appeals, if they wish, to the Department of Education. And again, this is under the statute. And at that point, the department will then review the school's submissions, their appeals, and then based on those findings, again, take those to the board, and the board then will vote on whether the appeals shall be successful or not. And again, I believe you have the proposed schedule that has the timeline. So, yes.
How is this different than what we've done in the past?
In the past, what happened, and I wasn't here when that was done, but as I understand it, the department would do its findings and assessments and then release preliminary grades to the schools, soft grades, and at that point, the schools then would appeal, and then the department would go back and look at the appeals, and then, once all that was final, the department would take that to the board, and then the board would then place the schools in their categories. However, in reviewing that procedure, that doesn't comply with the statutory law. And so what the department is proposing is that we actually comply with the law and make the findings and assessments based on Indiana code as are required, and then take that to the board, and the board then places the schools. And then if the schools